welcome back to another episode of the Interview with Scientist series. Today we have Dr. Ketan Marballi, who is a career education specialist at Ryerson University in Canada. Prior to this, he worked as a research associate at Syracuse University in the US, and before that, he worked as a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Arizona and University of Texas. Today, we will chat about his career journey and his transitioning away from the lab bench. Welcome, Ketan, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Chinmaya. Thank you to you and the Addictive Brain for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's our pleasure as well. Thank you for joining again. So, let's start with your research background because, as I mentioned, you worked as a postdoc and as a research associate. So, can you tell us a little bit about your PhD and your postdoc work?
Sure. I won't go in a lot of
Sure.
details, like 5 or 6 different projects, or more. But most of my research was around the molecular biology of either psychiatric disorders or neurodevelopmental disorders. Sometimes there was an overlap between them. But my PhD research was on a protein involved in schizophrenia called neuregulin 1. And my PI at that time had found a mutation in neuregulin 1 that was associated with schizophrenia in a Costa Rican population.
Okay.
So my work was kind of trying to characterize the biological effects of that mutation because it was a missense mutation, which is very unique for a single nucleotide change to cause a missense mutation that's associated with schizophrenia. Typically, the single nucleotide changes are they cause non-functional changes, or a lot of times it's just a mere association. So my research looked at levels of different immune markers in people that had one copy of this mutation. Again, it's not a 1:1 association. If you have the mutation, you don't necessarily have schizophrenia, but I was looking at it from the perspective of the functional effects. So we found that people that had one copy of the mutation had higher levels of some pro-inflammatory cytokines. And we used lymphoblastoid cells from these individuals. And then I also looked at some neuregulin processing in postmortem human brains. So that was a lot of Western blots. And we found that regardless of whether the mutation was present or not, people that had passed away and had a history of schizophrenia, this is in a completely separate population, had changes in the way neuregulin was processed. And interestingly enough, that mutation was found to inhibit the internal processing of neuregulin. So because it's a transmembrane protein, it gets processed on the outside and on the inside of the cell. So that was kind of my PhD research, is just looking at how the processing of this protein impacts biological function.
Yes.
In my first postdoc at UT Austin, I looked at the long-term effects of alcohol abuse on gene expression.
Okay.
And then in my second postdoc, I was back in a schizophrenia research lab. So I looked at a family of genes called early growth response genes or proteins. And I was trying to find novel transcription targets of that protein.
Okay.
It's a transcription factor that plays many important roles in the nervous system. So again, a lot of microarray bioinformatics and a lot of PCR. That was my second postdoc. And then at Syracuse, I was working on a project on Rett syndrome. Rett is very similar to autism, but it's believed to be caused by a mutation in an epigenetic regulator that causes a lot of breathing difficulties and seizures. So the project was around molecular mechanisms around Rett. Yeah.
So as I can see, you have a background in various kind of neurodegenerative neuropsychiatric disorders. So can you tell us the difference between a neuropsychiatric and a neurodevelopmental or a neurodegenerative disorder?
Okay. So they're actually they can be related, but I'll try to break it down based on my understanding. So I think psychiatric illness has to do with changes in behavior, changes in mood, and changes in cognition that purely, if you take that definition, that's psychiatric illness. If you talk about neurodegeneration, just like the term suggests, it means that there's destruction of cells in the nervous system.
Okay.
So I would say Alzheimer's would be more neurodegenerative,
Yes.
whereas schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, that's more psychiatric illness. Neurodevelopmental usually means that there has to be a series of changes that occur at different stages of development, meaning right from childhood or even before that up to adulthood, that lead to the phenotype or the expression of that disease in adulthood. So schizophrenia is one example where it's believed that there may be early stressors in your life that cause some changes, and then finally it will manifest in early adulthood as schizophrenia. So neurodevelopmental is referring to that.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that. That would be helpful for many of our audiences. So, as I can see, you were having a successful career in academics. So, why did you decide to move away from academics?
I think so. As you're very familiar with working in academia and as a postdoc, so you know that success in academia is equated with getting a faculty position or getting a really great maybe research scientist position. I think I was at a point in my career where I found that I had not made that jump, and I had when I examined my core values, which I always tell people who are asking about career transitions, where should I go, I always tell them, have you thought about what you like to do?
Yes.
And that is something that can change over a period of time. I think we think that because we're PhDs and we're scientists, there's only these sets of things that we should like to do, and that shouldn't change. I don't think that's true for any profession. I feel like for anyone, your interests will evolve over a period of time. Your career interests will evolve. And so at every stage of my career, I think I made a sort of a mental note of what I like doing. And so when I reflected on what I liked doing, it was things like working with students, helping organize events that promote networking. And I could clearly see that running my own lab was not anywhere in that list. Teaching. So those were the kinds of things I liked. So I think that prompted me to really make the shift, although I did make it slightly later in my career. But like I said, things evolved with each stage of my career.
So you are more interested in the business development side of academics?
Not even business development. I would call it more sort of student support, mentoring, teaching, training, helping people network. And when I say student, I'm meaning broadly trainee development, meaning postdocs as well. So and I found that I had the most fun when I was presenting my research at conferences, at posters, and when I was interacting with people and talking to them and making connections, or when I was talking, or when I got paired up with a mentor, and I really enjoyed those interactions. So I thought there must be a career path that involves all of those things. And I think that is what prompted the move.
Nice. So what were the pros and cons of staying in academics or working in academics?
I think, again, this is a very tricky question, because when you say just academics, it's such a such a general term. A lot of it is dependent on which lab you're in, what kind of research you're doing, how is the environment in the lab, all those things. So I don't think I can say a blanket statement and say these are the disadvantages of working in academia. I'll just say, from my perspective, the pros were, especially in my PhD, I think I had a lot of freedom in designing experiments. I'm very thankful to my PhD mentor for giving me sort of free rein within a framework, of course, because as you know, all studies are funded. To this is the framework, you figure out, what you'd like to do. So that was really nice, and I think that kind of kept me motivated
Yeah.
in the wet lab part, because I was able to design experiments and be creative. So I would say that's a pro. The other pro is, I feel like in academia, again, depending on the environment and the field, there's a lot of collaboration, that people are open to sharing what they're
Yes.
doing. Whereas if you're in industry, especially if you're in a sector where there's very high competition, you may not be sharing, information with your competitors.
Yeah.
And I think the same applies for academics as well. Sometimes,
Yeah.
if you're afraid of getting scooped or something like that,
Yes.
you may not want to share your findings. But in general, I think the collaboration piece of academia I really like.
Okay.
Cons, again, depending on your circumstances, I personally found work-life balance was very tough in academia. Sometimes it was almost like being on call
Yep.
for your experiments. If you're working with animals, then you have to be available every weekend to deal with whatever happens with them.
Yep.
So I would say work-life balance, and I also found that career progression as a wet lab scientist, it was either faculty position or non-tenure track.
Yep.
I think now there are more possibilities emerging with running a core facility or going into sort of the administrative side of academia. But at that, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I only thought that, okay, these are the only possibilities, non-tenure track or tenure track. So I think it felt a little restrictive at that point in time.
Nice. Thank you for explaining that again. So, can you tell us about your current role? What do you do at Ryerson University?
Sure. So I work as a career education specialist, and I support the Faculty of Science graduate students.
Okay.
The Faculty of Science at Ryerson is basically 4 different programs that have PhD and master's students.
Yeah.
There's mathematics, computer science, physics, and molecular science, which is a mixture of sort of chemistry and biology streams. And as a career education specialist, my job is to really help educate students about different career paths, help them with, cover letters, resumes, networking. So I provide one-on-one support. I do some in-class programming with faculty. So if a faculty member requests for me to do a workshop on a particular topic, I do that. And then I liaise with other members on my team and other teams, because we come under student affairs, to host, career panels, employer-led events. So basically, it's trying to really touch different aspects of career development for students.
Okay.
And help them in, transitioning to fulfilling careers.
Nice. So, how was your transition journey from academics to your new position?
It was at times it felt very challenging, because this was, as I don't know if I mentioned this before, but you said that I was in Canada. So this was my third move. I'm from India. I did my bachelor's and master's there. Then I did my PhD and postdocs in the States. And then now I'm in Canada. So I think there were definitely challenges. And I had to do a lot of, volunteering, networking, upskilling, because career education was not my, 9-to-5 job previously. So really being involved in activities that are centered around career and professional development after, my day job was done. So it was challenging, and I'm happy that eventually I was able to land
a position. So, how difficult was it to maintain that balance when you were working at full time in the lab and spending volunteering?
It was tough. I think COVID in a very funny sort of way helped me with networking, because I was able to do a lot of virtual networking.
Yeah.
It also helped me with organizing events. So if you're familiar with STEM peers, so I was able to organize a few events thanks to the people at STEM Peers for giving me the opportunity to do that. And then I was able to really build sort of a community of support around me. So it was uh, it it was an interesting journey, but I'm like I said, I'm glad it led to this position.
No, that's really important, and I'm sure you're very happy with your new position. So, what steps, as you said, like volunteering was one of the steps for making this
Yeah.
transition journey. Did you take any other steps like networking or?
Yes, so I networked a lot.
Okay.
I would almost call it serial networking because I was doing it so much.
Yeah.
But I made it a point to have a target that I would network with X number of people.
Yes.
At one point it was every week. Then I made it sort of every day, smaller number every day. I networked a lot because I knew that coming in as a newcomer, there would be some barriers, and I think it's also important that people know who you are and
Yes.
that you're serious about transitioning into this field. And I think you are probably the best example of building a brand. You've built a brand around the addictive
Yeah.
brain, and now people recognize you because of that. So I think for any profession that you're trying to go into, it's important that you build a brand, build a name in that position, in that profession. Sorry, and the way you do it is obviously networking, volunteering,
Yes.
writing articles, maybe attending conferences and meeting people there. So if it's a new profession, making sure you connect with professionals in that field
Yes.
at a conference, at a happy hour or whatever the case may be. So it's all of those things combined. I think that will eventually help you transition. So it's not just one thing like networking or volunteering. It's a
Yeah.
variety of things that will help.
Definitely. So I have been intrigued with this question. Can we call this as your industry transition because you're still working in the
In academics,
academics?
yeah. So I think whether you're transitioning to industry roles or whether you're transitioning to quote unquote non-traditional roles in academia,
Yeah.
I think the strategies are still pretty similar. You still have to network, you still have to upskill, like I said
Yeah.
before, particularly if it's something that's not related to your primary field of training. So I think, although I wouldn't call it an industry transition, I would say I have changed industries or changed fields from
Yes.
being a wet lab researcher to being more a sort of student affairs or career support staff.
Yes.
So it's still the same steps, and those steps are, like I mentioned before, networking, volunteering, writing articles, writing maybe summary posts on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So doing whatever it takes to, really show people that you're serious about this field, you're committed to this field, and you're trying to establish yourself as a professional in this field.
Yes. Any advice for students and postdocs who are preparing for a transition?
It's so I'm trying to think what the most pertinent advice would be. So I would say take advantage of opportunities at your institution. So
Yes.
and try out as many things as you can. So just like with food, you don't know if you like something until you try it, right?
Yes.
So try, consulting, or try maybe a business development club,
Yeah.
or um, just try maybe volunteering for different things to kind of figure out if you like something. I think that's something a lot of us struggle with, is figuring out, okay, I want to transition, but I
Yes.
don't know where to start. So the
Yes.
best place to start is volunteering for different things and doing informational interviews.
Yeah.
Take advantage of career support staff at your institution. So now I think it's become a pretty common practice at most institutions to have some sort of a dedicated staff member to help you with resumes, cover letters, CVs,
Yes.
etc. So if there is someone available like that at your institution, take advantage of that. Take advantage of free resources that are available online. So I think like your channel is great for people to look at interviews with scientists to find out how they transition.
Yes.
But then there are websites like Imagine PhD, Versatile PhD. There are blogs like
Yes.
Jennifer Post's blog or Chris Conway's blog. So there are so many different resources that you can
Yes.
use, and YouTube is an amazing. It's a treasure trove of resources. You can find almost
Yes.
talks on almost any profession, any career path there. So
Yeah.
take advantage of that, and then I guess don't put yourself in a sort of a time limit. I have to make a transition by 3 months, 4 months, because
Yes.
it may take longer. It may take shorter. You
Yeah.
never know, but realize that it's it's a stepwise journey, and so after you start networking, exploring different paths, you'll eventually find something you like,
Yes.
and then you can really focus on that path and build yourself to kind of be really pursuing that path as a career.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for your time and sharing all the advices. I'm sure my audience will benefit from this. And if you're interested in learning more about Ketan, I would highly recommend to follow him on LinkedIn or connect with him on LinkedIn, and I'll provide the link in the description. Thank you very much for your time, Ketan.
Thank you, Chinmay.